around construction excellence. I'm doing this on the hoof because I'm not obviously with construction excellence, but they're the voice of the Welsh construction representing every part of the supply chain, set up in 2002 by Welsh Government in response to the Egan report, Rethinking Construction. That takes us back a few years. Wow.
I know that.
Now an independent self-funding body.
I don't know if you could read upset me. I'm Fred. You can see what's.
Can I just ask everyone to make sure that their microphones are turned off? Just coming through there, if that's okay. They're an independent self-funding body campaigning to highlight the industry's role in underpinning Welsh Government strategy, built environment fit for the future, and they obviously make the case for collaborative working, and we'll come on to some of that the collaboration that we were looking at in our presentation going forward. I'm going to skip over the remaining slides of Construction Excellence Wales, and perhaps we'll come back to those towards the end of the presentation if anyone's got any further questions around construction excellence themselves. And I'm going to move on to the presentation. And just by way of an introduction, it'll be myself and Neil Robbins. My name's Richard Mann. I'm the Group Director of Operations at United Welsh Housing Association, also Deputy Chief Executive. Been involved in the evolution, if you like, of the factory over a number of years, and happy to chat to you and let you know what we've done today. And I'm accompanied in the background by Neil Robbins. He's the Managing Director of Celtic Offsite, which is a part of a subsidiary business of United Welsh. So what I've done is we've got a number of slides. I think we've probably got about 30 odd minutes or 35 minutes or so to do the presentation. What we'll do then is I'll do my presentation. Neil will go through his, and then we'll probably take some questions towards the end. Maybe allow sort of like 15 minutes or so for a Q&A session, if that's okay with everyone. So thinking of the Egan report, kind of winding the clock back, I guess the question is how did all this start? And I guess probably being involved in the development process for a number of years, there's been a number of publications and that have talked about off-site manufacturing and modern methods of construction and kind of presenting the virtues of those. And I guess there were a number that came out kind of around the 2016-18 mark. The Farmer report, there was a report produced by Cardiff University and More Better, and Welsh Government themselves produced the Reimagining Social House Building in Wales report. And interestingly, in that report, it stated that it intended to inform leaders of local government, housing association and private business. It aimed to encourage those leaders to take a fresh look at what we did, how we delivered new social housing specifically, and to consider complementing traditional construction methods with new technologies and approaches. So there's a marker really put down by a number of these documents telling us stuff that we probably knew already around the kind of virtues around cost, quality, time, around modern methods of construction. But for whatever reason, the construction sector had really struggled to evolve and develop and take up at that time. But there was definitely a significant shift, a significant emphasis, if you like, in terms of starting to look at this and actually starting to get some conversations turned into actions, if you like. So I'm going to leave the key sort of like some of the detail around what is MMC to Neil, and Neil will pick up on that later. But in principle, you know, what we've got on kind of the left-hand side of the chart we're producing here, the construction, and it's the kind of stuff that we see, you know, the brick layers, the block layers, you know, all of the kind of, you know, working on a site in the mud, in the rain and everything. That's the kind of traditional form, right the way through to the other end, which is your 3D volumetric. This is the house, you know, being delivered, completely made up, kitchens, bathrooms, electrical, all in a box, delivered on site, craned on and connected up within 20 minutes or so, however long these things take. So you've got this kind of range, and Neil will pick up on how we viewed it when we were developing our thinking further on, but they're the kind of ranges that we work within. So I mentioned around, you know, why, and going back to those reports, there's a lot of information in those reports, but I just wanted basically maybe just to re-emphasize some of the stuff that we probably knew already is when we're looking at building off-site, we've got the opportunity to do things in a dry environment, which is going to produce better quality. We're developing a skilled workforce. If you look at, just the things that are constructing the factory now, the car manufacturing industry, you're very cross if you get a defect in your car. You're upset that there's something wrong with it. Yet, in a house, we kind of accept that there's defects, liability periods, and things like this that are always going on. So there's a recognition that in a modern dry manufacturing environment, we can get the better quality. There are improvements around safety advantages. There are lots of challenges around the construction industry on site around health and safety. Again, trying to make it easier. Safety environment for workers, the well-being. There's the opportunity to improve sustainability, increase energy efficiency, reduce waste. Reducing impact on the local community. I'm not sure if anyone else is in a similar position, but when we're constructing on site, the disruption, the dust, the noise for adjoining owners is always a challenge. And then also, we've got the ability to sort of diversify, improve skills and opportunities in the construction sector as well. So there are lots of things that I think that we all kind of know that exist really in terms of going down that route. So we were in that space, if you like, a few years ago. We were looking at this, and we formed a collaboration with a number of other RSLs. We kind of drove this idea and started thinking, what if you like. And with background, I guess, in England, of some of the larger RSLs in England investing in some manufacturing facilities, we kind of took the view that with all the evidence and policy direction, that we would actually want to take a look at it and ask ourselves the questions, really, what it would require to establish a facility in Wales, what would the scale be, what kind of off-site manufacturing would we want to do, what kind of investment would need to be made. And to do that, we initially took the view that we would work with a number of HAs and in numbers, there's strengths and everything else that goes along that. And we formed a bit of a collaboration, and we managed to secure some funding. I think it was from the Innovation Housing Partnership to undertake or commission a report that was done by Altair to look at how could this work? Is it worth doing? Is there capacity in the sector? And that report, if I recall, was published in around May 2019. And it was no surprise to anyone that it came back and said, yes, this is a good idea. Yes, it would be great to do it as a collaboration if you can do it. But interestingly, one of the other recommendations that came is it said, look, whilst you've got, you as a group of housing associations are building homes, so you've effectively got a market there that this thing could deliver to, you may want to bring in some kind of private sector expertise and maybe look at some form of JV arrangement. And we did, interestingly, then start having a dialogue, if you like, with a particular supplier to see whether they were in alignment and whether it was fit and whether that had some legs. So like in summary, it was obvious it was going to recommend that there was a business case for us to do that. It also went on and actually said, you can also then push the limits around the environmental aspirations, improve quality, delivery times, and all the stuff that we know off-site manufacturing can bring with us. So we took that report to board. I just want to give you kind of a bit of a frame, if you like, in terms of that journey from there on in. We took that paper to board in around July 19, and we're really lucky, I guess, at United Welsh. We've got a very engaged board, and that's a board that wants to make change and certainly was on board with the decarbonisation programme, and everything else was kind of hitting around. So we took that paper to them and said, look, we want to explore this, and we want to look at the opportunity of working with a provider, private sector provider. And we opened up dialogue with a company that we'd already delivered an MMC scheme with, and we wanted to understand again what that level of investment was, what the potential legal structure would look like, what the risk share would look like, what would be done with profits. And so we started developing that thinking, but for a number of reasons, I think we found that actually that was quite difficult to do. And while we were kind of having that conversation, there were a number of other pieces of the jigsaw that were actually falling into place. So around the February 2020 time, we developed our thinking around the organisational decarbonisation plan. We called it our Towards Zero Carbon strategy, and that set out some hard targets for us around decarbonisation that could really only be achieved with the use of MMC. And we also then, a couple of months later, we started taking to our board a number of major developments that we were looking at. One in TD in Nelson in Caerphilly. I think at the time we were looking at up to around 200 units on there. And there was a second site that we were also then developing around Windsor Colliery. So what we basically had is a kind of jigsaw, if you like, that was starting to come together, which was sort of like saying, do you know what, you've got sufficient capacity there. You've still got the aspiration to achieve the lower carbon targets, which timber frame and the MMC would do for us. We've got the appetite to do this. We already know that the build quality, because of the other work that we've investigated, would deliver for us. So we started kind of thinking, well, do you know what, actually we could probably, if we scale down the aspirations and see whether we could do this ourselves and deliver this ourselves. So we then looked at appointing another consultant. In fact, there were two, to develop a business plan for us to self-deliver it. And I guess the overall question that we were asking was, you know, how many units would we need to produce in a factory to make it viable? And then was it kind of within our scope in terms of what United Welsh had itself in its own development pipeline? And so we appointed one seasoned consultant who you may be hearing from in the next 5 minutes, who at the time had a lot of experience in setting up factories, and a trusted consultant who does some work with us around sort of like the commercial work that we did, and they come back and actually said, yeah, actually you do. I can't remember what the magic number was. I think Neil perhaps give us some numbers around that, around what we worked out would be required, to get us to what we wanted to produce, as we call the sweet spot, and Neil will pick up on that, about what machinery, plant, premises and everything else that we would need to do, and what number of units we would need to produce. Basically, we got to the point where we felt that actually we could run this. And so we then had a conversation with, we went back to board, and we had a further conversation then with Welsh Government. So around January 21, we adopted the business plan, and we actually made an application, because I'll mention about the social purpose of the business in a moment, that we went to Welsh Government and said, look, is there any way that we can get some support from you, from some funding? And Welsh Government agreed and supported us. So we went back to board again in February 21, and we got the agreement from board to proceed. So this was, let's go out, buy the materials, buy the plants, buy the equipment, and actually start developing the factory itself. So we've had quite a period of engagement board following our thinking and getting us to where we are today. So I took an extract of our paper we took to board, and I thought I'd just read that to you. And it was basically, we said to board, is the natural progression for us in delivering our zero carbon aspirations, which came out of our Towards Zero Carbon strategy, and also the government's ambitions to achieve net zero carbon by 2050. It's for us now to own and operate a facility to directly manufacture SIPs, and Neil will explain what they are in a moment, using MMC, and this will move us towards delivering our net zero carbon homes. I think everything that we've entered into contract probably over the last 12 to 18 months now will achieve EPCA, all of it's off gas, so it supports our aspirations in achieving that. So, but in doing this, we're also going to create more jobs, more training opportunities. We're directing those training opportunities to tenants, and they will pick up on that. Living in our local communities, and we'll have a strong platform for partnership delivery with local authorities and ourselves. And the key thing for us then is around the question about what happens then with the surpluses that the business generates, and they in essence then get reinvested into our optimized retrofit program. So for those who are in the housing association world, we're being tasked with improving all of our existing stock to EPCA by 2025, if I recall. So we're trying to work out how we're going to be able to do that, how we're going to fund it, and then we see the surpluses generated from this business supporting our aspirations to get our stock up to that standard. So I just want to give you some flavours then in terms of what were the kind of key considerations at that decision-making process in February 2021. So it was quite a lengthy discussion with board because clearly it's quite a significant investment for us. And so we covered things like, you know, the scope of the project, how big the factory was likely to be, what kind of machinery we would want to put in there, the timescales and milestones, and interestingly, a lot of conversations there about alignment, about how we would get everything up and running and then try and fit it into our development program. And for those involved in development today, when you're looking at things like SABs, the planning system, it's quite a challenge to make sure you get those timing alignments correct. The legal vehicle, the tax implications, how it sits within our group structure, and I'll just show that very simply later on, and what the tax implications around that. How we would basically fund it, because we would need to get cash into the business to employ people, to buy the capital equipment, to lease the building, and how all that was going to work, governance structure. And then we started developing a kind of operational risk register. So it started looking at the finance, what the risks were to the rest of Celtic Horizons, should it fail, because that has to be on there. The commercial aspirations, operational productivity, all those kind of things were in there. Financial planning, how we were looking at benchmarking, because the value for money agenda has to be, you have to be very clear that that what we're producing represents value for money, not only to United Welsh, but also to the Welsh Government themselves. And then part of the initial thinking when we actually had this idea was around standardising house designs and systems, because we felt that enabling us to standardise house types, we would reduce the replication on engineers' costs. We'd be able to make the actual houses themselves more efficient, reduce waste and everything else. What the social value was, disaster recovery, and of course, if everything goes wrong, what the exit plan would be. So these are the kind of considerations that we had with our board when we in February 2019 when we decided to go ahead with it. So I just put a quick slide up in terms of how it works contractually in a way. So it's a pretty simple process, really. United Welsh, when we let construction contracts, we use standard forms of contract, joint contract tribunal contracts, design and build, JCT, and we basically say, here contractor, build us 10 houses. Now, for example, so what we now say in there is we say, here contractor, build us 10 houses. By the way, we're nominating a supplier, and that supplier will be Celtic Offsite, and you have the main contractor then will have a JCT subcontract with that supplier, and it effectively becomes full loop. And then similarly into financial arrangements, United Welsh pays the main contractor pays Celtic Offsite, and then Celtic Offsite then at the end of its financial reporting year, gift aids surpluses back to the parent company, which we then dedicate into our optimised retrofit programme. So actually, it isn't particularly complicated structure. It's pretty standard practice in terms of construction contracting frameworks, if you like. And then just finally, just going into the group structure, how that sits with us. So we've got United Welsh effectively as the parent company. Harmony Homes is our development business. It does a lot of our new build site. But then we've got a subsidiary company, Celtic Horizons Limited, that contains the labour element for our maintenance services. And then we've effectively slotted Celtic Offsite into that. So in essence, we already had the organisational structural vehicle to do this. And Celtic Offsite effectively complements that and sits within that. So on the bottom right-hand corner of my slide, I've got the words pass to Neil. So I'm going to hand over to Neil now. So if you just want to let me know as you want me to move the slides across, that would be great.
Okay, thanks, Richard, and good afternoon, everybody. So as Richard has explained, we looked at where this business was going to sit, more from traditional and then towards volumetric, and we wanted to see what our sweet spot would be. This is not something new for United Welsh. We've been involved for quite some time in MMC. The photo down on the bottom left-hand corner is a site which was done at Cromaiva, which was a BT passive project. And what we wanted to do really was, in terms of finding the sweet spot, was find something that we could take the learning really from the Cromaiva project, but not to a stage where, if you go to the far right-hand side, bottom right-hand side, where it's fully automated. For us, the sweet spot was investing in good machinery, and obviously investing in people. We were very much aware that there's a skill shortage in the industry, and investing in people was our way of trying to help with that. So supporting the skills shortage for us was one of the drivers. So we chose the sweet spot really of good automation in terms of machinery, combined with good people, good training, and really giving them an opportunity to flourish and move forward. If we go to the next slide, Rich. So we set our purpose and values, and Richard's obviously covered some of these. We obviously want to be manufacturing good quality housing. We want to complete that to include for factory fitted windows and indeed factory fitted insulation. That helps us get the building structure watertight as quickly as we possibly can. We obviously want to embrace the zero carbon agenda and minimize wastage, and using local supply chains to support and develop the circular and foundational economy. Creating job opportunities for our tenants of United Welsh and obviously the local people of Caerphilly. And we intend to do this via a training academy, which is currently in the process of being built. If we go to the next slide, Rich. We've been on quite a pacey last few months, as Richard's mentioned earlier. So I just thought I'd put some of these in just to explain what's happened over the last few months, really. So we had the business plan, as Richard mentioned, signed off back in March. That allowed us then obviously to procure some of the specialist equipment, the saws, which was on quite long lead times. So that happened during April. In August, we secured the factory. September, we went through a recruitment and training process, and we are due to start manufacturing houses this month with a view of delivering them in early 2022. Sorry. We've got the next one, Rich. Okay, so we mentioned that the factory was obviously in Caerphilly. It's a 28,000 square foot factory on Pontygwyndy Road. As you can see, we've just had the signs fitted, and we've obviously, as I mentioned earlier, invested in good quality machinery to ensure that the final product meets the best quality that we can achieve. The next video, on the next slide, Rich, should show a video of some of the source capabilities. So as you can see really from the video, what that does is provides a good quality product at a fraction of the time that they would take to deliver that on site. We then looked at the layout of the factory. So the factory's been set up with lean manufacturing in mind. We've also got the ability to store all of our materials inside to ensure that the quality is not affected by any weather. This would include things like moisture content of timber, making sure that like timber swells as it gets wet. If we can keep the moisture content fairly stable, when it gets to the saw, it means that the saw then is cut into the right size, and we haven't got to worry about any differential movement. Move to the next one, Rich. So our social values are of extreme importance to us. We wanted to be a real living wage employer. We want to create apprenticeships to supply back to the back into the industry to help combat the skills shortage. We want to further develop our tenants and local people, and as I mentioned earlier, we intend to do this with the training academy. The training academy will help as well with training for innovation, so we intend to share that amongst the group. So the employees of Celtic Horizons will be sort of trained in things like MVHR, air source heat pumps, and other technologies as and well they sort of show their heads, I suppose, and we then incorporate them into our final product. We're also keen to make sure that work experience is important for us. We're aware that there's families now that hasn't been in work, and providing a facility really that gives them an opportunity to see that it's not a doomy sort of glim lit factory. With the vibrant colours and the facility that we've got is really important to try and encourage people back to work. And once we get them involved, we want to make sure that they are trained to the best that we can get them to. So we'll be looking at NVQs, we're looking at apprenticeships. We want to find a career pathway, and we're currently working on that. So this is not just about finding a job in a factory. This is about how we take them from a factory environment onto, should they wish, the opportunity really to work on site, and then obviously help combat with the skill shortage that's out there. So we'll be working closely with our tenants and our employees and local people to ensure that we get to that stage. Go to the next one, Rich. So local supply chain is again very important to us, and as you see there, we're currently working with about 80% of our supply chain, which is Welsh companies. I've put in there excluding timber. That's not because we don't want to use Welsh timber. We are not just struggling with Welsh timber, we're struggling with timber through and through. The whole industry is, as I'm sure most people on this call will be aware, struggled with timber over the last few months really, and price increases and supply and demand has been a key part of that, which is why we're keen and working closely with Wood Knowledge Wales to try and ensure that we can develop a supply chain in Wales that will obviously meet the demand of all timber frame suppliers, and our view will be ultimately to use 100% sourced Welsh timber. We also want to make connections within the local economy and with other companies to help support us with a foundation and circular economy, and we'll be keen to hear from anybody who would be able to assist us in this. So if you are able or think that you can help us, please drop us a line and we'll share our emails with you. If not towards the end, I'm sure Constructing Excellence will share them for us. But we're obviously keen to work with supply partners as well moving forward. Go to the next one, Rich. So we've discussed standard house types, and Richard mentioned it earlier. By producing a standard house type, we obviously will give us the ability to accurately price projects going forward, and prior to purchasing the land, which will be a real advantage to us, so that we don't see any risks. Some of the big advantages again is once you've got a standard house type, then your architectural fees is more around planning drawings, not the final thing. And what tends to happen is we tend to be reinventing the wheel almost on a project by project basis, and that needs to stop, because that'll allow us to cut out a lot of waste and produce more surplus. That goes back into engineering fees, similar sort of thing, but it gives us more predictability around build costs, greater program certainty, and obviously designed with MMC in mind. That'll include reducing wastage on site, but providing a fabric first performance, which will be really important, particularly in these current times where we're hearing more and more things about our fuel bills are going to go up. We need to do our best as a company and as an organisation to make sure that we are delivering the best possible houses that we can for our tenants. Obviously, we need to do that with a sustainable construction mind, and hence the reason for adopting timber frame, which is low in carbon. And we'll be doing net zero whole life carbon costing and whole life costing for the project as well as we go forward. As Richard mentioned, some of our long-term objectives is to reinvest our surpluses to help fund with the optimised retrofit activities of United Welsh. And we would like to do this using a new factory, which we're currently talking to Caerphilly County Borough Council about a potential net zero carbon factory. And once we get to that stage and some of the things that we've already shared with you, we'd like to possibly provide solutions to other housing associations along our standard product. And some of the long-term objectives again will be around investing in R&D. The industry is moving at quite some pace. We need to make sure we stay on top of that, and the only way to do that is by reinvesting some of the money back into R&D. And we're also part of a consortium currently building for Welsh Government and local authority homes. There's I think it's 11 councils, 3 housing associations that's put out their aspirations to build some houses. So we're working as a part of a consortium to try and help that bid go forward. Put the next one, Rich. So this slide shows how our strategy fits in with United Welsh's, and you saw at the beginning Richard's slide. I just sort of talk through some of them and how Celtic Offsite will feed into meeting the objectives of United Welsh. So it helps to create 12% of the jobs that United Welsh want to support over the next 3 years. It will allow us to build 700 new homes by 2026, with energy efficiency at the heart of what we do, and I've explained why we want to do that, particularly with gas and fuel costs going up as we speak. All our new homes will be built from sustainable construction and low carbon, and we want to do this from a net zero carbon factory, which will minimise our carbon footprint, and ultimately invest our surpluses back into United Welsh's decarbonisation plan. We go to the next one. So we've put in here just a few photos of where we are right now. As you can see, we're trying to keep the colours vibrant. There was reasons behind that. We want the factory to feel appealing. We want people to be happy there, and we want to obviously encourage more and more people to be trained through this facility and through the training facility that we're in the process of building. Thank you for your time. If we've got any questions, I'm sure Richard and myself will be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I'm not sure if our colleagues from Construction Excellence Wales are back with us. If they could let us know if they are.
Yeah, so sorry about that. That's ironic, isn't it? Everything works fine, and then as soon as I try to open, I lose my connection. So, but at least I joined you for the whole presentation. So, sincere apologies. But really, thank you both. From a constructing excellence point of view, we're just talking about MMC, DFMA a lot, looking at how you practically implement this. So just to hear your real-time example of what you're doing, the risks you've taken, I think is hugely insightful. We've got many people that have joined us today, so I'd really urge you to use this opportunity to ask any questions that you do have. Please do raise your hand or just acknowledge yourselves and come in, really. I suppose from my point of view, what are the kind of current projects and programs that you're going to be looking at doing straight off? What's your program really?
Neil's going to pick that up.
Yes, so we've got 3 projects currently running through the factory and being designed. We're building 18 units down in Cardiff, which is part of a homeless project. That'll be the first one that'll get delivered early 2022. Behind that will be the second phase of Wingfield, which is a project that's currently just got planning. That's 23 houses, and we're awaiting planning on 5 houses in Nelson. So that takes us through our first financial year. Obviously, the first financial year being taken us up to April, and obviously a lot of this is being taken in board with the fact that we've obviously set the factory up. So not great numbers. I think there's about 46 houses I think to be delivered between now and April. And then, as Richard picked up, then going beyond that, there's Windsor Colliery and TD, plus a number of other projects that will take us certainly through the next 3 years. Our plan was to do around, well, next year will be to do 150, then up to 200, and then up to 250. So we've got quite a substantial amount of houses to build.
I think probably from my perspective, just to add to that, I was talking to Lynn Morgan, our Director of Development, a couple of days ago, and I think she mentioned to me we've probably got around 600 homes in the planning system at the moment. I think it's probably worth just also adding to that. Then it was quite an interesting one. We were talking about the standardisation of the frames and standardised house types and how they could be constructed when we were looking at the two big developments. But interestingly, at the same time, 11 local authorities were looking at a very similar proposition. The same issues. Ultimately, if you're looking at the same issues, the same challenges, it wouldn't be unusual for you to come to the same conclusions. And of course, Neil alluded to those authorities now looking at a very similar project. So, whilst we've got sufficient programme within our own development pipeline, if you like, to support the project. Neil mentioned earlier on that we are looking already starting to look at bigger facilities, perhaps in 3 to 4 years, to try and look at what the scalability of that would look like, delivering outside of just United Welsh's pipeline as well.
Super, thanks for detailing that both. We've got a question coming through from Matt Tiller. So as a product supplier, how can we connect with you to showcase our sustainable offerings? I suppose we can share details after this presentation, which I didn't allude to that in the beginning because my connection dropped, but the session has been recorded, so we will share that with you, and we'll also share contact details. So if you agree, then we'll do that as well.
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to speak to you. Thank you.
It might be worth mentioning, Neil, just on that, because I've written down about what the panel looks like going out. You showed on your slide that we have window stickers, so it might be worth just explaining what the type of SIPS panel that we're producing, so people can get an understanding of what actually goes into the frame.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, that's just come up as one of the questions as well, which has just popped up. So it's a timber frame panel that most people would recognise being sort of normal timber frame. However, we want to take that a step further. So what we would want to do is we want to fit in the windows in. We want to be factory fit in the insulation. We're currently working on a couple of projects subject to planning that we can fit the render board, or even the sort of the rain screen cladding, I should say, rather than render board, the rain screen cladding. So when we deliver a wall panel, it'll be the external facade with the insulation fitted and the windows. That will give us a structure that will be watertight, theoretically, within a day.
Super. I hope that covers Richard Hallett's question to you there. So, yeah, Richard, if there's any further questions that haven't been answered from your question, do let us know. Sarah Phillips has asked if there are any way for other RSLs to benefit from the knowledge that you pick up along the way, given the numbers that you plan to get through. Now, for me, this is one of the key things, especially in Constructing Excellence Wales, is that, we're looking at MMC and DFMA all the time. And this is why we wanted to put on the workshop, knowing that you were going through this process. I find it hugely insightful when you were weighing up the risks that you had to present to your board and the considerations of how to make that work along the way. So have you got any further intentions through United Welsh, or is that something that we work on with Constructing Excellence Wales as well?
From my perspective, I'm more than happy to, if people want to have a more, a detailed conversation. I appreciate, buzzing through a number of bullet points on slides gives you kind of high level thoughts. I'm more than happy to have more detailed conversations with people about our thought process and what really, are the kind of risks, the mitigation measures that you put in place. I mean, in practice, a lot of the risks that we put, we kind of briefly showed up on the slide around, program timing, the productivity and things like that are generally manageable. You can put mitigation measures in place. Funny enough, we were having a conversation about this before we came into the meeting about, what are, the real big risks and that were in there. One of the ones that I didn't put up on the slide, interestingly, was one around reputational. and actually, you know, what happens if it fails, and what does that look like, and what does that mean for United Welsh. But we were chatting about this, and I think, you know, from our perspective as an organisation, we also look at the risk of not doing things, and the fact that to move and change and to evolve and to innovate, we need to do things, and we need to take those measured risks. And I think, you know, on many occasions we take the risk and we succeed. On some occasions we take the risk and we don't. But when we don't succeed, we share that knowledge as well, equally as sharing the ones where we do succeed as well. So, you know, I'm more than happy, as I say, to pick up with people on where we are on our journey, and then and I'm sure we would open the invitation if anyone wants to come and look at the factory, to have a look around and see what it looks like in working practice, and I'm sure we'd be happy to do that.
That sounds like a great next step, really, from this initial seminar, is perhaps to do that, and Constructing Excellence Wales to facilitate that as well. And even if we did a workshop on, you know, drilling down to lessons learned and being, you know, open and having engagement through that. So potentially that could be next steps. So thanks.
Sure.
I wonder, Neil, if you wanted to pick up on Jamie Lannan and Martin Jones's. There's a couple of kind of technical issues or questions there. So Neil, do you want to pick up on those?
Yeah. I mean, certainly in terms of delivering the panel types, we want to try and keep the number down to as small a number as possible. And obviously it's that delivering the same over and over again that gives you the quality assurance that you would expect from a car plant, for example. We obviously, you know, in a situation where we can't just deliver one type, and obviously there'll be planning implications to anything that we try to do. And we're currently working with other providers to look at, you know, other forms of facades, for example, you know, render, brick slips, maybe, you know, sort of timber sort of thing. So we're still looking at them, is the honest answer, and that's going to be, you know, part of our R&D going forward, and that allows us to make sure that we stay on top of the game, really.
And I presume that's the same for the radiant heat tests and the fire risks, and that question that's just come out. It's an ongoing process.
Well, in terms of radiant heat, we're members of the Structural Timber Association, and obviously to comply with their legislation and you know, being able to build timber frames safely, we'd obviously comply with all of the legislation that would be required in terms of heat transmission should something happen.
Great, thank you. Is there any more questions from the floor to ask at the moment? We haven't got any more coming through, but this is we've still got a couple more minutes just to go through anything. We've got one coming through. Are Celtic Horizons contracting directly with RSLs or as a subcontractor?
We haven't yet. I think so. Like the kind of short to medium aspiration. I mean, we are, as I say, we mentioned it on. We are working with a number of other suppliers, interestingly, in terms of potentially making a submission for the design work for the 11 local authorities and ourselves for the project. So clearly, we're setting a marker that we will want to be supplying outside of United Welsh. There are a number of how can I say, rocks in the road stroke hurdles that we would need to overcome in terms of procurement and things like that, in terms of the scale that we could supply outside of that. But I think you know, my view of these things is always to leave the door open for conversations about how organisations can be involved in it. So I wouldn't want to say, you know, what is and what isn't on the table, so to speak, until we actually have those conversations. I started the presentations, you know, saying that with the first report we commissioned, I think there were about 5 or 6 HAs involved in the commissioning of that report, and you know, I think once we got that recommendation, just kind of things evolved and moved on, and priorities changed for different organisations and so on and so forth. So we started this as a collaboration, but we finished it to date as a single entity, if you like. But that doesn't mean that we would not, you know, we would close the door on conversations what time we look like going forward.
Thanks for that. One of the, it was on my mind as well, when you were detailing or demonstrating the fantastic work that you're doing in the skills and apprenticeship capacity. And I was kind of wondering what the relationship was like with colleges to support that. Are we asking them to deliver different things? And we've got one specific question coming up about, are they carpentry based, or, you know, can you explain a little bit more about the skills and apprenticeships and apprentices that you're using then?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of the timber frame facility, yes, we would look to do carpentry based and then look to potentially move them onto site. However, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the training facility is being built and it will be there for the wider organisation as well. So we would like to think that, you know, the Celtic Horizons and using that facility then to train for MVHR, air source heat pumps, boilers, and any other things that sort of come up. So the facility is not just about delivering just for timber frame, it's about delivering for the wider sort of skill set as well.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Neil, that the machinery that we've got down on site at the moment, the saw that you saw there, the capacity to do service runs and the like, so it can pre-drill all of the service runs. I mean, it's the way I describe it is that, you know, we're evolving, if you like, in terms of the frames that we're currently manufacturing are kind of bespoke because they were based on historic plan applications. The next stage for us would be to move to standardized frames and standardized panel systems and getting the various accreditations that we would require to start delivering those. The NHBC assists, is it, or sure? The certifications, or NHBC accepts. So getting the various accreditations in place, and then you know, as scale and capacity evolves, if we do get to see ourselves move into larger scale production, and where that can see us go in terms of pre-fitting will be you know, the kind of sort of like conversations and direction of travel, I guess, that we would like to see us move forward to. But I come back to the point that Neil alluded to in terms of his presentation around the sweet spot. I was fortunate enough to go to Japan a few years ago to look at their modern methods of construction over there, and it's generally like going into a car plant. You've got robots, you know, welding frames and stuff, and I think we want to maintain that balance of employing people and making sure that we're recirculating you know, funding through the kind of local economy, that kind of, you know, recirculation of the Welsh pound. I think we really understand that, and we want to make sure that we get that right balance in terms of what we're actually manufacturing, what we can produce on site, to make sure that we're employing people as well.
Fantastic. We've got there's one question, it's a bit about time frame really, but how will you manage factory downtime from potential planning and on-site delays? These will affect costs and productivity. 1,300 homes over the next 5 years is 260 homes. How many sites will you have on the go at any one time?
Right, okay. We would anticipate having sort of somewhere between 5 to 8 sites on the go at any one time, and to be honest with you, the more sites, the easier it is to plan production. In that, if you have a problem on one site and you're only delivering to one site, then you really do have a problem, because you know, once the factory starts, it just needs to keep manufacturing. And if you've only got the one site and you've got a delay, then the factory manufacturers, it gets to a point where firstly you have to cash flow that, and secondly you have to store it. So as you do more and more sites, you know, if you get a problem with a delay on one site, you can put more effort in the other sites, which is less likely to have a delay of the overall program, if that makes sense.
I mean, one of the benefits that we have, of course, is that we've got a direct line of sight from production to the client. And I think it's probably fair to say that when we were looking at the things that are in our control and the things that are out of our control, this was probably one of the ones that remains up there in terms of timing production to site delivery, and particularly, as I mentioned earlier on, those that are involved in the development function at the moment, you know, planning applications, discharge of pre-commencement conditions, staff process, and everything else is causing some considerable strain in terms of our ability to bring sites forward. But having said that, because we've effectively got the contractual relationship through the nomination process, we can introduce some flexibility around that. The challenge for us then, in terms of bringing forward some production if we need it, I think it's a different conversation where actually we're designing